Welcome to the All Creatures Podcast. This is Chris, and I am actually back in the United States dealing with some family issues, not good, but dealing with them, and I'm fine. Angie also had some family issues this week come up, so, we're taking this mini break right now. We need your thoughts and prayers. Just, think of us, and, it will mean a lot to us if you can think of us and give us some warm wishes coming our way, because we need it. We both need it, definitely. But that doesn't mean anything, that we're not going to stop doing the podcast. We absolutely love this podcast. This is our passion. Angie and I laugh and just have so much fun doing this. And we're so glad you enjoy it and enjoy the programming. And it's funny, I've gone back to the earliest episodes and I'm like, Angie, they're terrible. But I think we've hit our groove by episode 50. So, a couple of weeks ago, or actually it was like a month ago, Corbin reached out to us and he wanted us back on his podcast, Animals to the Max, and he wanted to discuss a very contentious issue. And I don't know if people got to listen to it last week. So Angie and I thought it would be great to play it this week. And that was on trophy hunting. And I'll tell you, Angie and I, we discussed how we would approach this because our hearts tell us one thing, we don't like it. But the other is, we wanted to take the scientific approach and try to be as neutral as possible. Angie and I both are scientists, and we just really believe that we need evidence. Evidence is what really convinces us that something is right. So that's the approach we took in the discussion. It was really good. I've listened to it, and it was just, wow. It's just a hard topic to swallow. So, we hope you enjoy this episode. We will be back next week with a new species. We definitely will be back next week. So look forward to that. But hopefully you enjoy this one with Corbin. And here we go.
Welcome to Animals to the Max. I'm your host, Corbin Maxey. This show is about animals and the people who dedicate their lives to them. And welcome everybody back to another episode of Animals to the Max. I am your host, Corbin Maxey. As always, thank you so much for tuning in to the show. I appreciate it. I'm just going to really just kind of cut to the chase. If you've been following me on social media, you know that I completely, I opened up a huge can of worms, like a giant can of worms, like a 55-gallon can, giant, whatever, thing of worms. And so basically what I did is I asked all of you out there about trophy hunting. Are you for it? Are you against it? Do you think it helps with conservation? Do you think, the money goes back into the communities? And I thought maybe I would get a few comments. And anyway, we're nearly at, I guess currently right now, around 70 comments on all of you who are into this. And I love how passionate you are. So I just want to say thank you so much for all of you who take the time to comment. And a lot of them were giant novel comments, which is great. So I really, really appreciate it. But I wanted to have a roundtable discussion, and this is the first time this has ever happened. And folks, it might be the last. But so we're gonna see what happens. But I invited on my friends, two of my favorite people from the animal podcast community, Chris and Angie, the hosts of the very popular All Creatures podcast. Now, they not only are they excellent hosts, but they are scientists. They're actually doctors, which is insane. Which I kind of feel weird calling you guys doctors, but
No.
But Chris and Angie. But I just wanted to have this conversation about trophy hunting. And welcome to the roundtable.
Oh, thank you, Corbin. It's so great to be back. And interestingly enough, as we're recording this, I just got the official letter that I graduated 1 or 2 days ago. So you can actually call me doctor. It is official.
Oh my gosh, I'm gonna.
You lied to me. She lied to me. She graduated last year.
I'm going to insert applause. My mom actually lost my diploma, which I have no idea where it went. I gave it to her because she's like, here's my, safekeeping.
Oh, no.
Yeah, so I have it mounted in my office, but it says, you know what I mean? It says copy, or you know what I mean?
That's so funny.
Yeah.
Well, your mom let you live with a lot of wild creatures when you were little, so she gets cut some slack for losing a diploma, in my opinion.
Yeah, there you go.
Trophy hunting is something Angie and I have touched upon a little bit on our news segments, but me personally, it's something I've struggled with the last decade. And teaching, in classes at, the University of Florida or at the zoo school there, it's just something that we all struggle with. So it's not an easy topic, but I know Angie and I both talked about our approach today, and we're kind of taking a scientist view of trophy hunting, not our personal view.
Sure. Yeah, I think if you it's so easy to let your raw emotions dictate how you talk about this and the language you use, and I love that. That's why I love a lot of the comments on your Facebook page, and in general, just the dialogue. But in order, I think, to have a fully roundtable discussion about this, without Chris and I, for the record, being experts on conservation biology hunting, right? That's not, we're more physiologists that can read and understand literature to make sense of it for everyone. So with that being said, yeah, it's more, I tried to find as many studies as I could that would talk about pros and cons. And just so your listeners know, for me, generally speaking, since I'm going to try to talk with my head tonight, but my heart is similar to Chris's. For the record, I do come from a family of hunters in Michigan, avid deer hunters. I grew up that way, and they're responsible hunters. Of course, they have licenses and a lot of safety training, and we grew up eating venison chili, and my grandpa would make venison jerky and a whole bunch of other pretty darn good foods, in my opinion. So that's where we have to separate what type of hunting we're going to be talking about today, and I'll let Chris touch on that because he's such a good such a good educator. He's got all the notes. But when it comes to trophy hunting, obviously, I could never do it. I don't agree with it. And that's my heart. And so, but hopefully the listeners will stay with us today and see what the literature has to say about it, and of course, there's tons of cons. Just take a look at Facebook. There's tons of cons, but the biggest thing I want to dive into from a scientific point of view is, are there any pros?
Right. There you go. And this is why I wanted you both on the podcast, because I knew you would look into the evidence, being both scientists. That's so funny.
Well, it takes a little bit.
Use it loosely.
It takes me a couple hours of ramping up and getting angry and and getting on all these social media sites and getting kind of a public opinion. And then I try to put that aside, and then I move on to Google Scholar and PubMed and a lot of other places that try to be as peer reviewed as possible.
So really what happened is I just wanted to have a conversation about trophy hunting. And with me, when I envision trophy hunting, I think of Africa. So recently we had, we had someone, a gal from Kentucky, kill a giraffe last year, but the photo surfaced in this July, and so there's this big outrage. And so I just wanted to know what your thoughts were on trophy hunting. Basically, it is so incredibly vague, and several people commented, which I'm so happy you do. All of you, thank you so much. And they kind of corrected me, or they kind of said, "Hey, listen, be more specific." So, Chris, let's talk a little bit about trophy hunting.
So you're right. Angie and I, and especially in Africa, it brings up a lot of issues, which hopefully we can get into in this roundtable. But when you're looking at trophy hunting, you're basically, the way we looked at it is, you're going out and you're killing the animal for its horns, its tusks, its, some sort of trophy, a tail, or the skin of the animal, like killing lion. You don't eat it. You just skin it and take the head home and the pelt, and then you stuff it and have it as a trophy. Whereas, a lot of other hunters, like deer hunting, pheasant hunting, duck hunting, you're going to eat that animal. You're actually hunting for food. And so, take it away, indigenous people or people that hunt away from food, I would say trophy hunting is more of just killing the animal so you can put it up on the wall. So it's not just Africa. I mean, I have a study that hopefully we talk about today with bighorn sheep, in the Pacific Northwest and the impacts there in the United States. So, a hunter, it can be argued with deer hunting. They're looking for the deer with the biggest rack, and that's kind of a trophy. But on the other hand, that is somebody that's most likely, using that meat to feed their family. I mean, let's call it what it is. I mean, they want to eat that deer. So that is not trophy hunting the way we're approaching it today.
Chris has probably a few examples outside of Africa, but most of the studies I found were focusing on big game in Africa.
Okay.
Which, like you said, that's what tends to circulate or has been circulating recently on some of the social media sites that have drawn a lot of criticism and probably some support just depending on what the people think. But I think primarily probably criticism, because a lot of those photos are hard to take.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Mm-hmm. I have to say, though, I'm so happy we have social media for this reason. I mean, there's a lot of, pros and cons with social media, but to get people, I find it so great that you find people who are just as passionate as we are about animals and wanting to get the message out. Like, I love that about social media.
Absolutely. I mean, social media, obviously, it's transformed so many things in the past 10 years. And I think that, honestly, trophy hunting and conservation, photo tourism in Africa, things like that have been more on display there. And if it hasn't already changed some, which a study I'll get to will talk about potentially a movement to boycott places that are doing trophy hunting, and that could ultimately, let me back up, talking about boycotting the ecotourism industry there, so going on safari just to take photos and what us three would do if we went, right? Spending money, $8,000 to $10,000 for a week there per person type deal. And so some groups have gotten together and said, hey, if they're going to trophy hunt whatever animal in this area, then we won't go to that area. So, and all of that, I'm presuming is from just the outpour of social media, the accessibility, like you said, of people to have access to all this information and more at the touch of their fingertips versus historically where we maybe if you caught it on the 6 o'clock news, if it even made it. And
would you think 10, 20 years ago we'd be talking about this?
No. And
at least we're talking about it. That's a good
right. And Corbin can speak for me. I don't know. He's so young. He probably doesn't watch.
I'm not that. You are so. I almost am 30, Angie. Come on, give me a break. I had a midlife crisis.
Okay. Well, you're probably not the phase in your life where if I catch the world news at 6:30, I'm super excited.
We are so excited.
It also means that my kids are in bed or they're with their dad somewhere. So, but the U.S. is notoriously not always the best about covering international news. So that's why I like to listen to BBC and watch PBS and things like that too. But what did make international news, be it of course on social media, but then I would say even on the 6 o'clock television, where some of this stuff took off, I don't know, Chris might know the year, but was with the trophy hunting incident that happened with Cecil Lion.
Cecil in 2015.
Cecil, yeah.
Yeah, and I was going to ask you guys, I feel like that's when it really took off. It sparked worldwide outrage.
So
with that, it's, and I hopefully, we can talk a little bit, especially when we talk about, the pro argument as far as how it helps conservation and the difficulties, because when you talk about Africa, you're talking about 57 different governments. Most are either single party or military controlled governments. They're not free democracies like we think of it, right? So you have 57 different countries with 57 different laws. There's no international law that says you can't kill an endangered species. There isn't. There's treaties and different things in place. So Cecil, in Zimbabwe was baited. There was an elephant that they had killed the week before. So they dragged the elephant near there to lure Cecil out of the park.
So hunters killed the elephant? Like trophy hunters killed the elephant?
Yes,
and they used the carcass to bait? Oh, my God. Okay.
Yes. And so this dentist from the U.S., he paid $50,000. He had a permit. So, it's like all the anger went at him when really it was the tracker and the hunter, or the tracker's the guy he paid to get him there. Anyways, they get this elephant carcass. It's near the out boundary of the preserve or reserve where Cecil was at. Cecil comes out. This dentist shoots him with an arrow. Cecil runs off. He doesn't die till the next day, so he's suffering for this whole time. And they killed him with another arrow. So then they skinned him, took his head. He had a tracking collar. They never found the tracking collar. And then what happened was in Zimbabwe, immediately, like Angie said, tourism drastically decreased to go see Cecil because he was such a huge draw. And they lost a lot of money. But in the end, Zimbabwe found nothing wrong with what happened. There was no prosecutions or anything like that.
So they have been studying them, correct, Chris? The Oxford University have been studying him for how many, like several years, right? I mean, studying him, he was a prominent part of their study.
Yes. Yes, and Angie has some stuff talking about what happens when you kill a male lion because they're notorious for infanticide. Thankfully, in this situation, I think it was his brother or cousin or another male lion stepped in and did not kill off the cubs. He actually protected them. So that, thankfully, because when you kill off a male lion that has a pride, you pretty much just killed off all those cubs or young lions because the next male is going to come in and kill them all. So the females come into heat and they can breed and all that stuff. Because he has like one or 2 years to get his genetics in the gene pool, and then he's out. The next male lion comes in. So yeah, that was a big one. Cecil was a big one, and now this giraffe has brought it back.
I look like Angie. I was about to cry too. Angie looks. It was like the saddest.
Yeah.
No, it's awful. Like, I don't even mean to be like.
Yeah.
I was reading. I was kind of doing research like you guys. Probably not as much. But I was just looking at Cecil the Lion and just reading the story. It's horrific. Like the details that go into are horrific. How he was suffering for so many hours. I think some people say anywhere from 20 to 40 hours. Anyway, it's just insane. How,
Yeah. And it's like, and it's, so when you go to trophy hunt, and that's where I guess the moral or ethics come in. And that's where, Angie and I are trying to take a step back. What does that mean? Well, for Zimbabwe, that meant they lost revenue right off the bat. And then if I'm looking to go somewhere for safari, I'm probably going, Kenya's, they don't have trophy hunting there. I'm probably going to go to Kenya. I'm going to spend my money there and go where that isn't supported, but that's my own personal opinion. Is that right? I don't know. I mean, we're going to get to a part where there are some pros. I mean, there are some pros to this. So
right, and I think we have to. One of the biggest components of trophy hunting for the governments that support it and the people in the industry that support it, and of course, I'm sure for the hunters that go and do this, is the fact that it does generate money. You can't deny that. There's definitely, in fact, in Zimbabwe alone, trophy hunting generates roughly around 16 million US annually.
In just Zimbabwe?
Yes, in Zimbabwe. Mm-hmm.
Wow. And just out of curiosity, I don't mean to put you on the spot, but what does like phototourism bring in? Is it a lot more or is it less than the hunting?
So see, you could be a scientist.
Good.
That's exactly.
Yeah, it's good.
I have a. Do you guys want to see my replica degree?
Yeah, you got to find that original diploma before I believe it. So.
Go to Angie. Go to Wikipedia. Replica. Everything's right on there.
That is there you go. But yes, no, Corbin. But seriously, that is exactly what I thought. And I started looking into it. Okay, if money is going. How much? So my questions were: how much money is going towards conservation, or the local people thereof are benefiting off? Not just basically governments lining their pockets. And then, with that being said, how much does tourism that you and I and Chris would want to participate, and probably a lot of our listeners would, if somebody just handed me a $10,000 check, peace, that's, you would find me. You would
Rhino Orphanage.
You would find me in, first I would go to Lewa, and that's in Kenya. And then I would hitchhike down to the old, to the Rhino Orphanage. Okay. But seriously though, so those were my questions, and stick with us, listeners, because we definitely will get there. I want to talk about trophy hunting versus tourism, general tourism, and the costs. And I actually found a really great opinion piece that was recently published. Now, granted, that's not facts, so I have another study from 2016 with facts. But the biggest. Without that being said, most people typically always just say, well, the money doesn't go to conservation, or it does. So there's different numbers out there. Once again, I think the listeners in general, Chris already mentioned that there's 57 countries in Africa. Mm-hmm. So every country is going to be different. And then every species is going to be different as well. So it's not. Dealing with lion hunting in South Africa is not going to be the same as black rhinos in Namibia or hippos in Zambia. They're going to start potentially culling or trophy hunting some hippos in Zambia, which had been banned for a while, but now they're unbanning it. So it's a different so that's why it's so complex.
Okay, so let me just read you a comment really quick, okay? Because I feel like you just almost answered it, okay? Are you ready? Oh my goodness, I just saw Chris's gif of opening a can of worms on my Facebook. Oh my gosh!
It's a big old can of worms.
It's a huge can of worms, and it's so funny. So my fiance Sam, she's on my Facebook page manager feed, and so she's at work and gets all these angry comments and all this stuff. She looked at me.
Good woman for putting up with that.
She doesn't look at him. She looked at me last night. She said, "What did you do?" Like she's like, "Oh, here we go." Okay. So I'm going to read you this comment. Our first comment comes from Paul, and Paul actually is the host of the very popular Varmints podcast.
Yes,
oh, we love
that.
Varmints.
Do you?
Paul,
Yeah,
yes.
he's good. I like it. It's good, kid oriented anyway. He basically said anyone who claims that trophy hunting helps any animal or group of animals or any local economy is full of beep, zero respect for trophy hunters.
Yeah.
All right, Paul. Well, and I think that's a very common opinion and thought process, and I don't think he's wrong. One study showed, for instance, in Zimbabwe, where they generate 16 million annually, that about 3% goes locally towards the local communities. Okay,
3%.
Well, the study doesn't mention where the other 97% go, because what you have to think about is there's a lot going on there. There's besides the local communities, there's going to be people that are hired in for, like Chris mentioned, tracking, and people that are hired in for the camp management, people that are hired in for maybe even lodging. So that's where the numbers are it gets a little bit tough if they mean like just locals, like giving back to the community, or not. And it also doesn't say if it goes back to conservation, because any way you slice the cheese, conservation costs money, period. End of story. In fact, in North America, a lot of the models of hunting were promoted by conservationists to help generate money for the land. I mean, traditional hunters, when, like Chris said, for food, they're conservationists. They don't want an animal to be depleted because they know that it's good to keep an animal around. And so that model in the United States, that a lot of us from the U.S. are so mad about what's going on in Africa, for instance, we started it here. I think we just have a lot more checks and balances to where the money does, a lot of the money, probably not all of it, but a lot of it does actually go back into the animals. And I think that in a lot of the African countries, and I don't want all of our friends over in Africa, I don't want to point fingers at any certain countries or any certain species or anything like that. So the numbers are really hard to find. So one study in Zambia says 3% local people, but we don't know 97% could be conservation or could not. But in general, for instance, in a pretty thorough study in Namibia showed that for both hunting and tourism, okay, so this is revenue generated by both coming in as a trophy hunter or coming in as us three with our cameras and our binoculars, is that it's usually if it's allowed by the government or the agency to do this trophy hunting, or even a safari or whatever, it's like an agreement between the conservancy operators and the private owners of the land, be it the government or quote unquote private owners. Okay. And so then the revenue that's generated from that, typically 8 to 12% of the total lodge revenue and 30 to 75% of the trophy price, depending on the species, will be given back to the conservancy. Yeah. And then the rest maybe pays other people or pays the actual operators that need to come in there and do that. So that's where the numbers are going to, and this is in Namibia. So other countries are going to do different things. Like I said, the number was 3% back to local people.
Right.
So there's a big difference between local people going back to the conservancy, going to the operators, going to the conservancy. So that's why it gets really complex. But in general, for Namibia, for instance, their financial reporting is supported by a lot of non-government organizations, NGOs, and is typically thought to be somewhat grounded in the truth and double-checked between reports from tourism operators and hunting operators.
Now, I actually have a comment from someone who did a study in Namibia, Erin.
Oh, sweet.
Yeah, and she just wanted to add her comment, and she just said, I just want to add that even though licenses and for these animals are very expensive, governments in Africa are often corrupt, and the money does not go back into the community. So it's just...
I want to say,
I don't mean to giggle, but anybody who's spent any amount of time in Africa in any sort of different countries, and I've been lucky enough to go twice and hang out with locals that were living there in both Zambia, South Africa, Tanzania. And yes, there's a lot of corruption going on. It is very different than in the United States.
And Chris, what are you going to say?
Yeah, I was going to say, our interview with Allison, and Allison is actually Angie, a really good friend. And Allison was the one doing rhino relocation. And that was a question I asked her. I said, well, what about trophy hunting? And she'd been on the ground. This is somebody that has dedicated her life, risked her life watching these rhinos and moving them around Africa. And she said, there are very few places that do it right. She knows of one ranch, and I really wish I could have got the name of it, that actually does work hard. You come in, a lot of that money goes into conservation. But she said, like Angie just said, there's a lot of corruption, and that money is lining the pockets of the trackers and everybody else. It is not actually going into conservation. And I think for them to market it, I mean, what a great thing to market now. It's like, come to Africa, pay $100,000. I take $80,000 of it. I throw $2,000 towards giraffe conservation, and I could say you killed that giraffe for conservation.
I think it's just a complete load of crap.
Yeah.
It's complete. Chris, these animals are endangered, near extinction.
Yeah.
We should not be. Yeah. What was that? Was it a black rhino that was auctioned off?
So this is the one in Namibia that Angie was just talking about. So this made headlines a few years ago. Black rhino. It was a charity auction in Texas. $350,000. This guy won it. Now the thing is, they were going to cull this black rhino, supposedly. That's, we have to kind of assume that they were telling us the truth. Not the hunter, but the Namibian officials. They said this was a problem rhino. He was old. He was too aggressive. He was killing off calves and cows. So they were going to have to cull him. And that is I'm going to get here and tell that the elephant thing in South Africa is horrific for me because, I love elephants. But anyway, so this is an animal that's going to be culled. It's going to be killed, right? And it's run by the Ministry of Environment and Tourism out of there. So they auctioned this off. This gentleman paid it, went and took the rhino, brought home the horn, the head, and the meat did go to a local village. It did feed. And that's typically what a lot of these big game hunters do. They donate the meat to a local community, and so that helps feed them. Now, you presume that money went back in, like Angie just said, and laid it out to some of the conservation of this. Now, what I just said, not to be on my high horse, but in South Africa, and like when people are, Angie and I was talking about this too, and you're like kind of anti-zoo or bringing animals under human care. In South Africa, there's really no wild. There's no true wild. It's all managed game parks, right? And I remember I had a student from South Africa, and she gave a seminar on how they manage their elephant population. So let's say you have a park that can only house 60 elephants, and now you have a herd of 80, 90 elephants. Well, they have to go in and cull out and kill 20 elephants. Now, do you have people come in and pay for that to kill 20 elephants? Well, and this is a whole bigger can of worms that Angie and I kind of opened up last week on our news talk show. They have found that you just can't go in and kill a family member without having huge impacts on the behavior and that social structure. So now they have to go in and kill a whole family group, babies and all, because the babies that survive this, there are a lot of studies that show these baby elephants like wake up in the middle of the night screaming. They have PTSD, and so they have to take out 20 elephants of a whole family, and that is how South Africa is managing their elephants. So it's so complex, and it's
right. And in my mind, in my mind, even with the black rhino example, I just go to, okay, there's a bull, he's causing some problems, probably because he's not on enough land, potentially, or doesn't have room to do what he's going to do. Yeah. Potentially, as a land manager, conservation manager, you have to call him, you think that's your only choice. But I would argue, why don't you just relocate him to a different area?
That's my question, because I feel like listeners will think just relocate. But then is that going to mess up a different system, though? You know what I mean? Is that going to...
Well, and there's 1,000 questions to that, and that I would actually have to do research on what some of the answers are for relocation of individuals, or depending on the species or family groups. But I think some of the problem potentially is that is there places to relocate them to? Are there other parks? And I think we are starting to see a movement where historical ranges of animals that were wiped out, like, so the black rhino used to be not in North Africa, but in Zambia and Zimbabwe, and it's just in Zambia, it was completely hunted and poached to extinction there 20, 30, 40 years ago. I can't remember how many years ago. And so we are seeing efforts to translocate black rhino, white rhino, I don't know about elephants, to their historic ranges, like back into other countries where they are maybe wiped out from, because the governments are trying to prove that they for ecotourism reasons, that they want this animal back. Like in Zambia, they want black rhino back in Zambia. And so they've relocated like 20 to 30 in the past 5 to 10 years and to a park there. And I don't think it's open to the public yet. But that still takes a lot of coordination and a lot of money to move an animal and to do it well and to do it right. And so I think
millions of dollars.
I think if the listeners are saying, well, they should have just moved the black rhino, or they should just relocate the whole elephant family. I agree, right?
Yeah.
Wholeheartedly. But when it's not about the money, it's about the money. And so, okay, they got $350,000 to have this black rhino that they were going to cull, and it probably would have cost that much. They got that money towards whatever, allegedly conservation. But if they were going to, he's being a bad boy, we shouldn't move him, it probably would have cost them $100,000 to move him or whatever. So then they would have gone in the negative, right? So
yeah, but this is like a critically endangered animal. Like, isn't there less than 5,000 left in the wild? Like, what are we? Yes. Are you kidding me?
Right.
Like, what?
You're telling me you can't find a home like that? And that's the thing, is maybe that's where these conservation type managers or whoever's running the show needs to get a little smart. I bet if they did a GoFundMe, hey, we can either trophy hunt this bad rhino who's naughty, or we can raise money, or we can raise money to relocate him. I would bet
10 times the amount they made.
I would bet they would make a lot more money on translocating to a place where there's more land. But a lot of that, there's no really proven model. And so it is. And we also here in the United States, it's hard, it's hard when we don't live overseas. Now, of course, there's tons of Africans that are not fans of trophy hunting as well, probably because they, just with their heart disagree with it, and B, because they probably they haven't seen the economic revenue that allegedly has been promised.
They just see these big rich American hunters flying over, killing you know what I mean? I think that's what they see.
Right.
Right.
Well, you're talking, Corbin, some of the other stuff, some of the other studies. And this is at Dr. Craig Packer, who hopefully soon we'll have him on our show. We're talking to him now. So he's pretty well known lion guy, and he is still in Africa. He should be coming back in the next couple of weeks, finishing up his studies there. But he's looking at the impacts of trophy hunting on lion and leopards in Tanzania. And he's finding, and Angie's got some really great data too that she can follow up with me on that. But again, he was talking about, you're killing off the pride, the big, strong, large male lion. That's who they want to kill or trophy hunt. And you have all these impacts down there. Now, again, lions are endangered. There's only 24,000 left in the world. And he, in his studies, the parks in Tanzania, they estimate need about $600 million per year to keep them up. And a lion hunt, in his argument, at $10,000 is not going to help that.
It's not a drop in the bucket, right?
Yeah. And I haven't even touched about the South Africa. I don't even know if we have time, but hunting lions in South Africa, it's all canned hunts. These are hand-raised lions that people hand-raise. They throw out there and they shoot them. So that's different. I guess different discussion for different day. But Angie, you had some data as far as you kill one lion per 2,000 kilometers or something just to be sustainable, right?
I think a healthy debate using scientific data is what we need, because all of us on social media, I'd love us with our hearts and making comments and stuff like that. But that, money talks, what's the saying? Anyways, money talks. And so I think that's where there needs to be more studies to try to help guide the people that are making the bigger decisions overseas, whether it's NGOs or government officials. And there are scientists that are really trying to do that and look at it from a very kind of open-minded point of view. Because just a spoiler alert, when I was looking through all the data, I found studies that said, trophy hunting makes money. Yay for conservation. And I found studies that said, not really. Not if you really look at the data hard. Of course, different species, different countries. But I definitely didn't find any studies that demonstrated the key number one thing that I feel in my heart, not using my brain, is, does trophy hunting generate increased population numbers for these endangered species? And I cannot find a study anywhere that says, yes, after 3 years of trophy hunting out the big 2 or 3 big males, we actually saw a population rise. I haven't found, and now they find me that study, because at the end of the day, I am not a fan of, I don't hunt. I'm not a fan of any type of hunting for myself. No fan of trophy hunting. But I guess if there's some way you could show me numbers that trophy hunting a giraffe actually increases giraffe populations down the line, or let's say black rhino. Black rhino is even more critically endangered. If we we trophy hunt 5 or 6 of these guys, all this money, I don't care about the money. I care, are the numbers of animals is the population growing? And I couldn't find that data anywhere. Now, it might be out there, and if anybody listening has that data, please let me know.
Yeah, I would like to see it.
I have the giraffe hunter right now online too. Should we take it? No.
No, but okay. So one study, Scott Creel out of Montana State University, looking at lions, because lions is a big one, especially after Cecil and whatnot. He basically looked at lion populations in Zimbabwe, Zambia, and a few other African nations that alleged they had sustainable takes. And he concluded that generally across the board, limits need to be much, much stricter than they already are, for populations not to, continue to decline. But his formula, looking at certain models, and I'm sure if I had his model, I'd find a lot of flaw in it, because that's what I do as a scientist. But the model that he had basically predicted that if he proposed potentially allowing killing one male lion at least 7 years or older per 2,000 square kilometers range for 3, so one male, 2,000 square kilometers for 3 years in a row, followed by 3 years of recovery. So like I said, I don't know what his model took into, did his model include climate change and droughts and I don't know, or disease, things like that. I don't know if it what all included, but even still, if his model is semi-accurate, what is happening now is in most countries that allow lion hunts, be it canned or trophy or whatever, are way high. They're taking way more animals than that.
Yeah. And I want to say something. I feel like an average American, maybe who's not really into animals or doesn't have, let's say, our expertise, I feel like you would think like Africa's full of lions, full of rhinos, full of wildlife. I mean, and I feel like they think the continent is just, this great, we watch National Geographic and, that's how Africa is and everyone's happy and running around. And it's not like that. Like fewer than 24,000 lions. They are on, in a few years, I think they're going to be extinct. I mean, we shouldn't even be. Yeah, anyway.
Sure. So the numbers that I found is that lions and their habitat have decreased over 70%, decreased over 70% in the past few decades, so 20-ish plus years.
Oh my God.
And I think the other, aspect as a scientist is, that Angie and I always, we think about is genetics. Right. Mm-hmm. In Tanzania, I know there's a lot of inbreeding depression in lions, and that's something I want to talk to Dr. Packer about when I get to interview him. But like just this one study, to bring it back to North America, it's a Coltman study in Nature. Angie and I always talk about it's like one of the best scientific publications there are. It's about 15 years ago. It showed that bighorn sheep, when a hunter goes to kill a bighorn sheep, he wants the biggest, best rack to put on his wall. No one wants a 2-point deer on their wall. You walk in, you're like, what is that? It's a jackalope. That's what it looks like, right? And that is coming soon in the podcast. We're going to do the jackalope.
Oh, I cannot wait. And the unicorn.
Well, that's a strange animal podcast. Yeah, and the unicorn.
Yeah, these are.
Well, we recently did do the Asian unicorn, so look for that.
Yeah. But they need to have me on the Strange Animals podcast. So we'll do that one. But so you go out, you shoot the biggest, baddest, male, and in this study it was bighorn sheep, and those tend to be, not always, but tend to be the most genetically fit. Not always the biggest, but they're the ones that are the healthiest. So you start taking those genetics out of the gene pool, and they notice now these rams are actually smaller, the offspring, and when they grow up, their horns are smaller. So you're taking out important genetic traits on these animals. Again, in Africa, just with the poaching crisis with elephants, now elephants' tusks aren't as long as they used to be, and a lot of them don't even grow tusks now because those genetics are taken out of the gene pool. So when you talk about critically endangered species, some people say, going off on the next thing, like this giraffe, his genetics were overrepresented. He was older male. Okay. If you can prove to me and show me that money went to help other giraffes, I would be okay with it. But until then, when there's no transparency, I think a lot of people are making a lot of money in Africa that a lot of this money isn't going into the people, the locals, and conservation. I think until they start proving it, we have to be skeptical.
Right. And so like the study out of Namibia in 2016, a group of researchers, interestingly enough, from the WWF, World Wildlife Fund, got together and wanted to look at the pros and cons, basically the benefits of Corbin to finally answer the question that you asked initially about which makes more money, right? The tourism, us snapping photos and drinking our, what's the beer down there called?
Tusker. No.
Yeah, Tusker, okay. Right? Good, thank you for that. Us drinking our, that money versus the money from, the dentist coming in, right, and dropping a lot of money. So they looked, the paper was published in Conservation Biology in 2016. This is one of the current papers I could find. And they did a very, very thorough investigation and looked at it from a lot of different angles to see which is better, right? Tourism or hunting financially. Now, once again, as far as I can tell, nobody's ever looked at do populations actually increase.
Yep.
Because you can throw all the money you want in making your conservation park sparkle and bedazzle and have nice roads, but not that they're doing that. For the record, you need an off-road Jeep. But not that they're doing that, but I don't care. It doesn't matter how much money you put into it if the populations aren't sustainable and growing. Okay, so the paper doesn't go over that. The paper just looks at the money. So let's talk money. And what they found they looked at in Namibia, because interestingly enough, Namibia does have, as Chris mentioned, more fiscal transparency than probably some other countries. I'm not educated enough on which countries have what transparency, but these authors claim that in Namibia, between NGOs and other reporting agencies, that they could find the trail of money, allegedly. And so they looked at hunting and tourism benefits and operations from 77 communal conservancies in Namibia from 1998 to 2013. So in science, we like to talk about numbers. Is it a short study or long study? What you're in? How much did you look at? And this one blows a lot of other studies out of the water as far as the amount of operations they looked at in the years and whatnot. And so anyways, long story short, what they found, and this is, I think, for lots of species. Now, they didn't report, at least from what I read, if it was endangered or not endangered species. But I'm going to assume there was probably some endangered species in there, but I don't know if that's a fact. So for the authors out there, please, I apologize if I'm misquoting you. But they found that the major benefits for hunting were generated in the first, quickly. Okay, so the first 3 years you open up trophy hunting, bada bing, bada boom, you got that dentist coming in, and you get a lot of money quickly, right? Mm-hmm. To potentially start your program out or to get a surge of money that obviously, once again, should be noted that most of these countries are not very well developed, excluding South Africa, are not super well developed and are their GDP in general is a lot lower than most well-developed countries like United States or New Zealand too.
So Idaho.
Right. So they're struggling. That's what I'm talking about. That's a lot of these countries can't feed their people as a lot of their people as well. Okay?
Plenty of potatoes in Idaho, Angie.
Right. Yeah. So that's a different story for a different day. But they did find that the authors found that trophy hunting did benefit early on, and that tourism, us with cameras, benefited. It took about 3 years to really start recouping and getting financial benefits from the tourism. So it's a slower start. So if you don't have any money to begin with, doing just ecotourism is a little tough to get your feet underneath you or get the park established or get maybe animals in there or whatever it is. And then they also found, if we are thinking about the people, which I know for us animal people, sometimes it's hard to be oh my gosh, if there's a spider in my house, I will let it outside. Yeah. But people, unless you're like my family or my kids, I'm not super, I'm not super sensitive to human needs, which I'm working on that. But anyways, looking at it from a people's perspective, they did find out that the benefits of hunting versus tourism are, they benefit different types of people, different industries, if you will, right? Tourism is more lodge and locals where you buy trinkets and stuff, where hunting is going to be car rentals, airplanes, maybe some more of the big business, but they generate sometimes more money, so more money can theoretically be put back into the park. So the authors basically, that are very brilliant people, basically said that they summarized that they believe that that they're not mutually exclusive. Right. That in Namibia, when you're looking at just the money, that the pro of trophy hunting is that alongside ecotourism, it probably can work potentially. Yeah. For money, and this is just for money. This is not necessarily for quote unquote increasing population. Sustainability. And the other thing that people are going to think I'm so pro trophy hunting. I'm not, but looking at the data or whatever. The other thing people need to consider is that in Africa, there's a big debate in a lot of the land. Do we use this land for farming to feed our people and make money, or do we use this land for conservation? So I think the point of this article is also trying to show, too, that you can make, if your government or private owners or whatever are choosing to not use it as agricultural lands, and they use them as just parks or reserves or conservancies, that that you can generate money. And these authors conclude from their data that the best way to make the most money is to include both trophy hunting, obviously, I'm sure, with what is deemed to be sustainable levels, which I think we've concluded there's not a lot of data on what is sustainable.
No.
And tourism.
Yeah, and it's. Go ahead, Corbin. I was just going to say, like, my data, tourism in sub-Saharan Africa in 2015 was generated almost $25 billion. And so some of the pro arguments for trophy hunting, because I know we're coming in on an hour, so we probably got to start wrapping this up.
What?
No, we could do this for 6 hours.
We need more than an hour to solve all the world's problems.
I know. Corbin, you don't know I have to deal with Angie. I'm like, Angie, it's 2 hours. You got to stop.
He gets the coat hanger. I see the coat hanger on Skype, and I'm like, okay.
It was funny because even before we started recording, Angie, you were going into this giant tangent. I said, Angie, I said we have to save it. We have to save it for the show. I love it.
Save it.
I love you. I love your tangents.
Like Corbin, the Saola this week, SAOLA. There is no data on the Saola. There's like barely anything, but of course we filled an hour and a half talking about the Saola with Angie. It was just like, and this and that.
Well, I told
we know nothing about this animal.
I told a few funny stories. I mean, I almost died once from an Arabian orc. Somehow that made it on there. So
that was great. It was great. It was a funny story. But
it was okay. Really quick. I'm sorry. I'm a listener. A Saola, is that what you guys said? A Saola, correct?
Yeah.
An antelope species.
SOW.
Okay.
LA. Okay. It's the Asian unicorn. There may be 25 left. There could be a few hundred
25
left.
to a couple hundred. They don't know. They haven't seen any on a camera track since 2013.
Okay, I'm definitely checking out this week's podcast.
Oh yes, no, and
tonight.
A new one. It'll already be out. So we have our episode of just the hour of us talking, pretty much me just talking about whatever of Saola, the species, and then we also have an incredible interview with Dr. Barney Long out of he's Global with the Saola working group, but he's the species director for Global Conservation Wildlife, and he used to work for WWF, and he's like the Asian species guru guy. So the interview with him and the work that they're doing to try to save, basically the Saola is the equivalent of the vaquita right now. Okay. So really, really interesting stories. Not interesting, like amazing, awesome conservation happening over in Vietnam and Laos, trying to save this pretty decent sized hoof stock, pretty decent sized antelope-like animal that's gorgeous and stunning. So check out that interview if you haven't. You will learn a lot. This guy is so knowledgeable. He lived overseas for a long time, and he really gets the whole complexity where I get kind of turned off and frustrated by the complexity, and that's why I have to go to numbers and scientific data, where he's more like, oh, okay, let me figure each one of these pieces of the puzzle out, and that's how we're going to save this animal.
Yeah, it's good. It's good. Nice. Yeah, and I would just say, Corbin, especially to any listeners that, either support trophy hunting or do want to do trophy hunting, I just back it up. Do your research, do your homework, find out where the money's going. If it really does go to conserve that species, make sure you know. Just don't take it for, I'm going to go to Africa and kill a lion, and my money, because it's a very expensive trip, is going to go to help save lions. I would challenge them. Where's that money go? How does it help?
Sure.
And, it's very complex, and there is a lot that conservation experts need to come together with. So we find a happy medium, because banning trophy hunting isn't going to help Africa, and it's not going to help conservation. But on the other hand, just having an open season in Africa is going to drive a lot of these species to extinction.
I just think as humans, we have a moral obligation. I mean, are you kidding me? These animals are endangered. I know that we have to look at the facts, and we have to.
I can't believe I'm of the opinion you don't kill any endangered species like Iceland whaling right now. The fin whale. The fin whale's endangered, and they're killing off 250 of them this year, and that is horrific. That is horrific.
Yeah,
you shouldn't be killing any endangered species, period. But if we need to kill this one to save these 20, It's tough. It's tough. Like
Well,
I said, I struggle with it.
Yeah, and I think one of the things, like, what can a listener do that is passionate about, banning trophy hunting or not supporting trophy hunting, which we obviously saw a lot of that in your feedback. I'm one of those people. I think what you can do is you can potentially vote with your dollars. So probably not a lot of our listeners are able to have the $8 to 10 grand to drop to go on safari. But if you are a listener or know a listener that can do that.
I don't, Angie.
But I'm sure with social media now, you can find out what, even what tour agencies support this, and you could probably send letters. I always like to be, use education and things like that. But you could say, like, oh, hey, I'm not gonna support this. I'm gonna tell my friends not to go there. I was thinking about planning my dream wedding there, but now I'm not going to because you guys support X, Y, and Z. Things like that. I mean, I feel like there's movements that you can do to help show your support for banning trophy hunting or minimizing it. And in the meantime, hopefully the scientists out there and the economic people that understand numbers and statisticians can help look into the numbers to really see what is going on here, and then potentially show the governments, like, hey, okay, yeah, maybe with trophy hunting in Namibia, you generate money faster the first 3 years, but it's not as sustainable, or you're not going to, well, there aren't going to be any black rhino. So it's better to go with the slower model of tourism. Or for instance, there was a great opinion piece that just came out, I think today. I think I tagged
Yes.
both you guys on the link about in South Africa. Is it South Africa? Let me find it.
It's South Africa.
Okay, that they are going to allow leopard hunting. And there's a wonderful opinion piece by Simon Epsley. I'm probably saying that wrong because I say everything wrong and pronounce it wrong. But he's the CEO, I can say this right, of Africa Geographic. And he has a great opinion piece. He actually did, now it's not a peer-reviewed article, so I have to premise it with that. But he basically did the financial breakdown of trophy hunting in Africa for these quote-unquote 7. So they are going to allow 7 leopards to be trophy hunted at a certain price. I forget what the price is this year, which historically trophy hunting was banned because data had shown that populations were declining. The leopard is following a very eerily similar trend as the lion. Huge, but the leopard is listed as vulnerable by the IUCN, but they don't have the population counts the way that they do for lions, probably because they're more elusive. So their numbers could be even lower than they think. And so it was banned for a while, but now South Africa is bringing it back, right? And bringing it back with 7 of them. Well, this Simon does a great job of doing a financial comparison of at what point do hunting leopards start to lose money for the South African economy. Okay, so at what point, if people quote unquote banned going on their tour to South Africa and went to Kenya or somewhere else, it would only take, financially, he did the mathematics, he guesstimates it would only take 21 canceled photography safaris to basically hurt these seven leopards, and then they'd be losing money.
Yeah, so like if they go and kill these 7 by word of mouth, more than 21 people are going to cancel their vacations to South Africa and go to Kenya.
Therefore it'll be like neutral, like nothing. You just killed an endangered or vulnerable animals.
But of course, if more people are not, it's going to have more of an impact, especially with
social media app. I mean, it was all that article was all over my Facebook feed.
Yeah, so I think in just kind of wrap up my final opinion too is the economics. It's not. It can help, is what I'm hearing, from some of the studies, but it cannot supplant ecotourism. That should be the model. Maybe, some of these very remote areas where they go and tourists don't and can hunt some of these species that aren't endangered. Maybe that's the model we need to go to rather than, it's like the Wild West. I mean, it's 57 different countries, so you can't. And we can't, here we are Americans, we can't go and say, hey, you need to do this in Namibia.
Yeah, that never works. No.
Yeah, but I think as conservation officials and experts, and us influencing people using our influence, that, like Angie said, okay, we won't go to South Africa. We'll go to Kenya. Kenya has a ban on trophy hunting. So let's prop up that model. Botswana has a ban that's been like, I hear Botswana doing great things, but now they're thinking about lifting it.
Right.
Well, that's
right.
lovely.
So it's.
Do we have any more positive? Do we have any more positive topics to talk about today?
It
that's
is.
like the news. It's so hard.
I know it is. It's an ongoing. It's because it's so complex too. Like there's so many. It's not just like one company making money. I mean, there's all these different players at hand that could potentially be lining their pockets, and we haven't even touched on the fact of like. If any of these body parts or trophies then go into the black market, feeding that, that's a whole different podcast for a different day, but that's potential, right? Then you're just feeding, more into the black market. And so I don't know. I just think that a study in 2013, so this is dated, basically looking at the lion issues out of Tanzania and trophy hunting, kind of concluded that the only way trophy hunting could potentially be beneficial to lion conservation, so I assume that means increasing their numbers, and is where the revenues and then the user rights over wildlife are devoted to ensuring the benefits from lion hunting through compensating costs to other local people. And so hunting has to be managed long term and actually follow scientific data.
And that's what I like what you both brought up. Like, you just need to see the data. I mean, that you really need to see it. Like, once you see something to where, yes, trophy hunting is increasing the population numbers, yeah, I mean, like, that is something I'm happy you brought up. I'm really
You're right.
happy
And as far as I can tell, I would love somebody to email us and show us an article, and then we could talk about that. But as far as I know, in South Africa with big game that's endangered, I have yet to see that article. So most of the articles talk about revenue, which is a good start, but in the end, if the money's not actually making, even if you put all the money back into conservation and like Chris said, the populations are bottlenecked or their genetics have been ruined because you're taking out the most successful males, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how much money you put into it. So I think that's, and me, that's the bigger picture thing is like, I would follow the data, and we need more data, from good scientists and good government agencies and people like that. And the other thing I'd like to challenge the listeners with, and we could talk about more on a if Corbin's so nice to ever invite us back.
Yeah, I know.
Part 2 of the very uplifting podcast.
It could be. And if the listeners bring up a lot of good issues, I mean, we'll be more than happy to come back and talk.
And by the way, and I'm sorry, I'm trying to make light of this because I know it is this isn't the most uplifting topic, but I have to say something. I'm happy that we're all able to have a conversation as a community, and I'm happy there's people engaging. So that's what I'm trying to get at. So.
Yeah, that's great.
And that's where it is a step in the right direction. If you can't engage in civil discourse on any topic and you just let your emotions get to you, I mean, it is hard. You just spin your wheels, and which sometimes feels good to be, about something. I'm right there with you. But in the same instance, I think we need policy and action. And in the interim, if you are very passionate about this topic, which I'm sure many listeners are, I do think that there's things you can do at home, probably from your computer or in your local. Like if you're at a university, you could maybe have like a discussion group with a wildlife club, or you could talk with people. I mean, have civil discourse with people that are pro hunting, and you're going to have some insight on maybe. I don't necessarily know anybody. I don't have anybody in my circle, obviously, that's pro trophy hunting.
I was going to say, I was actually thinking about, because I feel like I need to see both sides of this argument. I was thinking about contacting an organization. I don't know if I could. I don't know. I'd be probably biting my tongue. Good. Well, then why don't you do the interview, Chris?
No. I gotta ask Allison, like, where did she see in Africa? Because I know she said there was a place, and
sure. And Chris, that could be
how is that benefiting?
Yeah, that could be a very good line to follow. I
that's
personally,
the model
because I come from a family of hunters of overpopulated deer populations in Michigan, I can have really good civil discourse, even though we totally disagree on, like, I don't want to do that, and I don't think you should do that, on why and what it helps. And so I think there probably are people potentially definitely in North America that are at least pro-hunting non-endangered species or species, quote unquote, on the fence, like wolves and bears. That's a very touchy subject here, as you know very well. The different podcasts for a different day. But having conversations with some of those people might, if you did want to educate yourself more on trophy hunting over Africa, that might be a way to potentially start. But I, on the other hand, I mean, I think that's a great way to go, to educate yourself. But then I also like to see the data, and I just don't think right now the data is not there to support trophy hunting endangered species in Africa. Period. End of story. Case closed. You can just put that in the beginning of the podcast, and then.
Oh, that's good. I mean, it'd save people an hour and 8 minutes.
Yeah, exactly. But I do think the other thing, though, I always, you know me, I always have a ... My clause with that, though, is just to get people thinking beyond trophy hunting, which is, of course, outlandish and despicable, in my opinion. But we have bigger fish to fry, my friends, over in Africa, as far as conservation is concerned. And that includes habitat loss, population fragmentation, climate change, and poaching. Mm-hmm. So, I don't want to say, like, this conversation is a moot point because there's really bigger issues. But in the same instance, when there are lots of things, there's lots more podcasts we can do.
Yeah. But it's you combine it all, right? And these animals, these species are struggling. And so it's not, that's why it's not so clear cut. You just can't say, well, we're going to do this. That's what everybody wants. We want the easy answer, and it's not. Well, and then it's 10 different things. Yeah, trophy hunting is one of those things.
Tidbit to chew on that I talked with Chris, and we won't go into it. We'll leave the listeners wondering what our opinion is. But I asked Chris, I said, okay, obviously we feel this way about endangered animals in Africa, but should it be okay to hunt or trophy hunt, whatever you want to call it, zebra, the common zebra? Not the grubbies. They're endangered. I will come get you if you do that. I will. As long as
you do not shoot a honey badger. Well, you can't because they're too tough.
Yeah, I was going to say, good luck finding one.
Yeah. Right. So I mean, that's a whole nother can of worms. Yeah. Okay. What about? There are certain, very few, but there are populations of animals, or certain gazelles and antelope. Not a lot of them, right? Not a lot of them, but there are certain populations that are, quote unquote, not of concern by the IUCN.
Stable. They're stable.
They are stable, and there is an excellent. That's so funny that. Well, it's not funny you brought it up, but I was thinking about zebras too. There is an excellent documentary by Derek and Beverly Jobert, the National Geographic filmmakers in residence. They've been doing it for so many years. It's an excellent documentary. Give me 1 second. Where they document this great zebra migration, this and that, and they followed this animal through the migration, and then at the very end of the film, a trophy hunter comes, kills the main animal, and they skin it, and in a matter of less than an hour, the vultures came in, ate the carcass, and there was nothing left of this animal.
Yeah.
And they just...
that's heartbreaking, too.
Yeah, and they left
now.
it. No,
Thanks,
no.
Zebras are like her babies.
No,
it better have been a common zebra, not a grubby zebra.
No, it was.
All hell can break.
It was, but it was the saddest thing because that was all that was left of this magnificent stallion, right? I mean, it was just
beautiful animal. Yeah.
It was just I couldn't even believe it. There was just nothing but just dust. And that was it. And they took off.
Yeah,
and it was completely legal. And so anyway. Check out the documentary. Wow. Yeah.
No, yeah. You'll have to send us a link, or we'll put it on some show notes or something. I would, because it is. I mean, and I think that there's so many different sides of the stories and different ways to look at it, and that's where I would suggest somebody who is pro trophy hunting maybe watch that documentary to understand the zebra, and that he had a life and a family group and intelligence and social dynamics and behaviors, and he was complex. And then in the same accord, I would suggest to somebody who's anti-trophy hunting to potentially read up on some studies. We can put one in the show notes, that the one in Namibia, that suggests that maybe if it's done right, maybe trophy hunting in tandem with ecotourism in Namibia could be done to benefit money, which potentially the numbers still need to be shown, but then could benefit animals. So, to try to just because these international issues are just so complex, and I think that people have a gut instinct, and that's not wrong. I think it's just it helps if you know more of how to help back your argument up, and then not even forget about arguing. What do we do about it?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we can't vote with our dollar. That's it.
Right. That's where social media can come in handy, and Facebook and talking to friends and the generation, the younger generation like you, Corbin.
I'm so
now you're admitting it. The other day, Angie tells me she wasn't even born in 1992, and now all of a sudden she's the old lady and Corbin's the youngest.
Yes,
I'm 89. No, I can't even believe it. Someone said that to me yesterday. So this is so sidetracked.
Well,
I am raising money for the Peregrine Fund, one of the greatest conservation organizations in the world.
They're amazing.
They're amazing, right? And so we have this meeting, and I am going to be the MC of this art auction to raise money, and like the whole what is the guy who does it? Oh my goodness, I can't even believe I just. Oh my God, completely.
The auctioneer?
Yeah. The auctioneer walked in. He's like, "So where's the MC?" And I'm like, "It's me." And anyway, he's like, "How old are you?" He's like, "What high school did you graduate from?" I was like,
oh man, well, I'll tell you, I think you have a wonderful baby face. I think it's fantastic. But if you did want to look older, which is goofy because most people always want to look younger. My husband, when he first started teaching at his zoo school, he grew a beard.
Okay.
So
this is as far as I can go. I haven't shaved it since we last talked.
Oh, okay. That's not an option for you then.
You guys, it's really not looking good. No, but seriously, thank you so much just for taking the time just to go over this. I learned so much as a listener. I'm just like, I learned so much. I took a lot away from this. Let's look at the facts. I'm happy we were able to see both sides. I don't think I'm ever going to be able to see like completely down the middle of this.
I agree.
Yeah, I agree.
But I'm happy we're able to have a sound conversation.
Yes.
And
that's
show the evidence.
That's where progress starts. It doesn't start. That's the thing is, heated debates or trolling or nasty comments, that doesn't really get anywhere. You got to start with sound conversation and then work towards solutions or what you can do with whatever side you're on.
Yeah, please don't be a troll. I'm looking at a few of them right now.
I know.
You just want to like get that little.
This is what we do in science. We debate. We debate.
Right, and I don't
come
think
to consensus, and then we debate more.
Yeah, and I don't think, unfortunately, even with all the top scientists in the world studying population dynamics of ecotourism versus trophy hunting versus the economics or whatever, I don't think we would have an answer by like next Tuesday.
No way.
It's going to take a while, and people have to be a little patient and potentially stay open-minded or work on the solution that they believe in the most. And also education. That's the thing is, that's what all three of us are doing, and I'm proud of us for doing it, even if it's an uncomfortable subject like this one, is trying to educate ourselves and then share what we learn with other people to help broaden other people's perspectives, right?
Right.
There you go.
Right. Yeah.
Education's power. Awesome. Well, thank you so much. Where can listeners find you? All Creatures Podcast, right? Subscribe.
allcreaturespod.com, allcreaturespod, or at allcreaturespod on Twitter, on Instagram, on Facebook. You can follow us, Angie.
Yeah, no, definitely do all that. Like us on Facebook.
I actually have a bone to pick with you. Why did it take you so long to accept my friend request on Facebook? This is ridiculous, Angie. I mean, come
me?
on. No,
Angie.
Chris was immediate. It was almost a little too sudden, but no, Angie was.
No,
I'm kidding.
Corbin?
She's like making me wait.
Here's the deal. Number one, always make them wait. Okay.
It's like high school all over again.
She's in demand, man. I'm telling you.
The number two, live off screen, my friends. Go out into nature.
Yes, there you go.
Yes.
And also, I have a 4-year-old and a 2-year-old, so I blame them.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you guys so much. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you. Hopefully you'll invite us back if we were on good behavior.
Of course, you guys are doing good. Thanks for listening to the Animals to the Max podcast. Please make sure to hit subscribe and leave a rating. It really helps me out. I also encourage you to check out CorbinMaxey.com. You can contact me there personally, even suggest a podcast guest, or if you just want to learn more about animals.